Discovering my wife's betrayal shattered me, but instead of letting the rage consume me, I decided to channel it into something constructive. So here I am, sharing my story in the hopes that it serves as both a warning and a release. Sit back, take a deep breath, and let's dive into this tale of deceit and heartbreak. Let us call my wife, who is 26, Jessica, and the other man, a so-called friend of mine, also 27. We will call him Mark. Here is some background. Our meeting was not accidental. Mutual friends had orchestrated it at a wedding when I was 22, and she was a bridesmaid. Our friends strategically seated us together, aiming for sparks, and they were not wrong. Jessica was stunning, and our initial conversation revealed shared humor and interests that made us click immediately. The evening flowed effortlessly with conversation, dinner, and eventually dancing. As the night wore on, with drinks and laughter, we shared a spontaneous kiss right in the middle of the dance floor. Our friends noticed and teased us about the obvious chemistry. We brushed off their comments and enjoyed the rest of the night, denying the growing attraction. Although we left without exchanging numbers, Jessica texted me a week later, suggesting we grab coffee. I was thrilled, agreed immediately, and what began as a casual date quickly evolved into a committed relationship. Our transition from dating to something serious was smooth, filled with affection and understanding, despite the occasional petty argument. Nothing seemed too serious until I proposed 2 years in, and we married a year after. As our first anniversary approached, I noticed unsettling changes. Jessica became secretive, her nights out with friends increased, and our once vibrant intimacy faded. I voiced my concerns multiple times, only to be dismissed as paranoid. Her indifference grew, chilling our relationship. I stopped the morning goodbye kisses, and our conversations dwindled to bare essentials. One restless night, driven by suspicion, I decided to dig deeper. Finding nothing incriminating on her phone, I searched her car and discovered a hidden second phone. The betrayal hit hard. I meticulously went through every message, documenting her infidelity. That night, I searched for divorce lawyers online, finding one who seemed suitable. The next day, haunted by my discovery, I impulsively called the number on the second phone, seeing Mark's name as the contact. Realizing my wife had cheated with a close friend unleashed a storm of rage. Alone in my office, I yelled and cursed until Jessica appeared at the door. Overwhelmed by anger, I told her to get out. She retreated to our bedroom. I had never raised my voice or cursed at Jessica before, but that day, I was a silent storm, seething and staring blankly. Eventually, I called my friend from the wedding, Mike. Hearing my need for a drink, he sensed something was wrong. Without explaining over the phone, I grabbed the incriminating evidence and headed to the bar. I arrived first, ordered 4 shots of Jack and a beer, and was finishing the last shot when Mike showed up. He wasted no time asking what was wrong. I laid it out. Jessica was cheating. The shock hit him hard, especially when I revealed it was with Mark. Mike, the guy who introduced us, could only apologize repeatedly. Mark and I were more acquaintances than close friends. I made Mike promise to keep this quiet, especially from his wife. If she asked, he would say I was stressed about work. He agreed, and we spent the night drinking and talking until I called an Uber around 3 a.m. I had not checked my phone all night. When I finally did, it was flooded with missed calls and texts from Jessica, asking where I was and if I was okay. When I got home, I found her asleep on the couch. I went straight to our bedroom, too drained to deal with any of it. The next morning, she was back in bed next to me. I dressed and left without a word, picked up my car, and buried myself in work to keep my mind off everything. I returned home late, around 10 p.m., to find Jessica waiting up, saying she had made dinner. I declined and headed straight to bed, but she followed, badgering me about what was wrong. My patience wore thin, and I finally snapped, telling her I just wanted to sleep and to leave me alone. The next morning, I got an email from the lawyer I had contacted. We set up a meeting for later that day. As I was leaving the house, Jessica tried again, this time with breakfast and an attempt at conversation. She remarked on how distant I had become, pressing for answers. I brushed her off, saying work was just hectic, and reassured her it would all be over soon. After a quick bite, I headed out, telling my assistant I was meeting a client for lunch, just in case Jessica called the office. The meeting with the lawyer went better than I had expected. I handed over all the evidence I had collected. He commended me for being thorough especially since we lived in an at-fault state. This meant Jessica could not claim much of my assets. I had not even thought about that. All I could focus on was ending the marriage quickly. He advised keeping the evidence, but I asked for copies instead since I had not confronted Jessica yet and did not want to hear any of her excuses. The lawyer's assistant quickly made the copies for me. I asked when Jessica would be served with the divorce papers, and he estimated about 2 weeks. Thanking him, I left the office, determined to confront Jessica as soon as I got home. When I arrived, the house was empty. I called her. No answer. I called again. Still no response. Frustrated, I texted her bluntly, "I do not care if you are with Mark right now. Get home. We need to talk." Almost immediately, she called back, pretending not to understand my urgent tone. I cut straight to the point. "Get home now." She showed up 15 minutes later, and I could not help but remark sarcastically, "Wow, 15 minutes? That is about the time it takes to get here from Mark's, right?" She stared at me, dumbfounded. I waited for her to respond, but she stayed silent, so I pressed on, challenging her denial and lies. As she became defensive and started throwing insults, I slammed my fist on the table to silence her, pulling out the copies of the evidence. I showed her the stack first, then laid out each printout, one by one. She broke down, started crying, and began apologizing, claiming she still loved me. I scoffed at her sudden change of tone. "Honey, where's that fire you had a minute ago when you were so keen on belittling me?" As she tried to approach and embrace me, apologizing profusely, I sternly warned her not to touch me. She desperately offered to make it up to me in any way I wanted. Looking her straight in the eyes, I told her, "Sweetheart, I will never touch you again. Do you know who else has seen these messages and photos? My lawyer. I am filing for divorce. Now pack your things and get out of my house." That confrontation was 3 days ago, and I have not heard from her since. Given the situation, I hope to avoid direct contact with Jessica altogether. All communication with her will go through my lawyer from now on. As for Mark, I found out he is engaged, and I feel obligated to inform his fiancée about what is happening. When asked how I plan to reach out to her, considering Mark might be on guard now, I have already figured it out. I have met her a few times before and have her contact number. I will try calling her first. If that does not work, I will drop by their place when I know he is at work and leave a note on her car, urging her to contact me. I am determined not to let him off easy. This morning was all about damage control. I scheduled an appointment with my doctor to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases, and that is happening in 2 days. I also reached out to my inner circle, my dad and a few close friends. They have been incredibly supportive, offering advice and help, though I assured them I have got things under control. Next, I contacted Jessica's family. I sent a message to her parents, thanking them for their kindness over the years, but informing them that Jessica and I are divorcing. I mentioned that I would miss them, though in truth, their overbearing nature is something I will not regret leaving behind. I gave them space to process this and reach out if they had questions. The most difficult message was to Jessica's sister, whom I had become very close to over the years. I texted her, explaining the situation and expressing my regret that our relationship might change. I thanked her for always treating me like family and assured her I would be there for her if she ever needed me. These conversations are just the beginning of redefining my relationships and reclaiming control of my life after this betrayal. After sending that message, Jessica's parents quickly responded, expressing their shock and concern. Here is a summary of our conversation. Jessica's parents: "We are so sorry to hear this. What happened? Why has Jessica not told us anything?" Me: "Jessica has been having an affair for at least a year. I believe it started even before our wedding. I do not know why she has not reached out to you, but I think you should try contacting her. She has left our home, and I thought she might have gone to you." Jessica's parents: "No, we have not seen her. We will call her right away. Thank you for letting us know. Are you certain she was cheating?" Me: "Yes, I found their text messages." Jessica's parents: "We are so sorry you are going through this. We will try to get in touch with her and talk." After this exchange, I decided to contact Mark's fiancée, which I thought might be more complicated. Perhaps Jessica and Mark had devised some elaborate cover-up, but it seemed either she was not informed or they underestimated the situation. At 2 p.m., I texted her to ask if we could meet. She quickly agreed, and we decided to meet at a small, quirky coffee shop near her work at 2:30 p.m. I arrived early, ordered a coffee that turned out to be awful, and waited. She arrived shortly after, got her coffee, and joined me. There was no easy way to break the news, so I came right out with it. Mark has been cheating on you with my wife for over a year. Her shock was immediate. I explained that I had only discovered this a few days ago while starting my own divorce proceedings. She asked how I found out, so I summarized the ordeal, mentioning the detailed evidence I had compiled in a binder. Curious, she asked to see the evidence. I handed her the binder, and she quietly leafed through the messages and pictures, tears forming in her eyes. I reassured her that she could take the binder, whether to confront Mark directly or to see if he would lie about it. Gratefully, she took it, thanked me, and left, looking understandably devastated. The weight of these revelations has been crushing. Despite advice to stay sober and keep a clear head, I need this week to myself. To sit on my back porch, drink, smoke cigars, and drown out my thoughts with loud music. After this, I will try to get back to my usual routine. On a practical note, I have packed up most of Jessica's belongings, her clothes, jewelry, our wedding album, and all photos including her. Everything is boxed up, ready for when she decides to retrieve them. I made sure not to damage anything, apart from a few picture frames. With my doctor's appointment scheduled and my lawyer actively working on the divorce, I have done nearly everything that needs to be done. Jessica's items occupy most of the boxes, and if she continues to keep her distance, this might turn out to be a surprisingly smooth divorce process. Update. I have admittedly been wallowing in self-pity, drinking more than I should. This is the first moment I feel somewhat sober since the whole ordeal began, and honestly, it is hard to describe how I am feeling. Numb might be the closest word. I mentioned that I had informed everyone important, except Jessica's sister, who I was quite close to, did not respond. That night, after sharing the update, I kept drinking and eventually passed out on the back patio. I woke up to the smell of breakfast cooking, and my first thought was that Jessica had come back, thinking that making breakfast could somehow fix everything. Bracing myself for a confrontation, I got up, ready to unleash my anger, but to my surprise, it was Jessica's sister, Wendy. Wendy did not say much at first. She just took my hand, led me to the table, and placed a plate in front of me. As I ate, she expressed her apologies. She explained that when Jessica showed up at her house, she only mentioned that we were having temporary problems that would soon be resolved. However, when I texted her about the divorce, Wendy confronted Jessica, asking why the divorce was happening if things were supposedly fine. Jessica broke down and confessed everything, although she tried to downplay the affair as a one-time mistake. I told Wendy that reconciliation with Jessica was out of the question and advised her to tell Jessica to seek legal representation if she had not already. Wendy clarified that she was not there to advocate for her sister. She was there for me, valuing our friendship independently of her sister's actions. This reassurance lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I had feared this mess would ruin our friendship. After expressing her support, Wendy and I shared a heartfelt hug. Wendy stayed with me for a couple of days using the guest bedroom. As I prepared to leave for my cabin, a property I owned before my marriage and thus untouchable by Jessica, I was gathering my hunting and fishing gear when Wendy asked if she could join me. Though I appreciated her company, I suggested she might want to check on her sister instead. She agreed, gave me a supportive hug, and left. I am profoundly grateful for Wendy's support during this tumultuous time. To clarify, our relationship is purely platonic. She is much younger than me, and anything beyond friendship would be inappropriate. It is indeed a strong friendship, one that has been a great support recently. I also want to mention that I went to the doctor and got tested. I am expecting the results this Monday. Additionally, I have reached out to Mark's fiancée a few times just to see how she is handling everything. She told me she is coping but feels uncertain about what to do next. I offered to meet up anytime next week if she needs to vent or just talk. I am more than happy to listen. For anyone else going through similar challenges, my advice is to stay focused on what you really want, whether that is pursuing a divorce or reconciliation. Set your goals step by step, lawyer, doctor, and notifying close ones, and keep personal matters off the internet where possible. Also, make sure to set aside time to process your feelings. Update. Hello everyone. It has been a while, but I thought I would share some new developments. I mentioned how Wendy came over and stayed for a few days before I headed to my cabin for some hunting. I have good news from the trip. I bagged an 8-pointer on my first day out, which I'm really pleased about. It gave me the rest of the weekend to enjoy some fishing. I caught 2 decent-sized fish. I cooked one for dinner and butchered the other. I spent the rest of my days at the cabin cleaning my deer and soaking in the tranquility of nature. Aside from a drink or two each day, I kept my promise to stay mostly sober, moving past the initial week of heavy drinking. Recently, I received a call from the doctor confirming that I am all clear health-wise. While it was not a surprise, given that Jessica and I had not been close in months, it is always a relief to have confirmation. I tried reaching out to Mark's fiancée, but did not hear back immediately. She eventually replied, letting me know she was staying with her family. She did not share many details, but from her move, it is reasonable to assume things are not going well. At least she is in a safe place with support. I reassured her that I was here to help if needed. She then asked to meet for coffee the next day, which I readily agreed to. We met again at the same quirky coffee shop and spent a couple of hours talking. She was curious about the steps I was taking regarding my divorce and whether there was any chance of reconciliation with Jessica. I made it clear that for me, infidelity is a deal breaker. The sheer disregard and disrespect shown by cheating, especially over such a prolonged period, was unforgivable. She shared her confusion and heartbreak, unsure of her next steps, whether to move on or forgive Mark. She mentioned her family was encouraging her to forgive him and proceed with the wedding. I decided to be straightforward with her. Just because her family desired a particular path did not mean it was right for her. Mark had demonstrated a clear disregard for the commitment of marriage by engaging in an affair with my wife. If that did not clarify his unsuitability as a spouse, I was not sure what would. I encouraged her to prioritize her feelings and decisions over the expectations of others, emphasizing that the choice was hers alone to make. I advised Mark's fiancée to make her own decisions based on what would best suit her life. I shared how, upon discovering the affair, I had tried to find a way to forgive Jessica, but ultimately, my heart and brain could not reconcile with the betrayal. I told her that while I had spoken to only one person about it, my decision was already made, and no one could change my mind. I suggested that perhaps when she went to stay with her family, she might have had a clear idea of what to do, but letting too many people weigh in could cloud her judgment. I ended our conversation by telling her to trust her instincts. Often our brains and hearts can mislead us, but our gut usually knows the right path. She thanked me for the advice, and we went our separate ways. The next day, my lawyer messaged me to say that Jessica had been served with the divorce papers at her workplace. I thanked him for his swift work. Shortly after, Wendy called to inform me that Jessica had been crying in her room all day. I told Wendy that Jessica was probably starting to face the reality of her actions. Wendy and I briefly chatted about my time at the cabin and what I had been up to, and then we ended the call. I prepared myself for Jessica's reaction, expecting she might confront me now that she had been served. I readied myself for a potential outburst, keeping some Advil nearby for the headache I anticipated. I also arranged for a friend to come over as a witness if things got out of hand. I am waiting, somewhat nervously, for what I've jokingly called Hurricane Jessica to arrive. When it does, I'll be sure to update you all. We have had cameras installed inside and outside the house since we moved in. My lawyer said there's not much he or I can do about it since it's also her house. I also can't withdraw any money from our shared account until the divorce is finalized, but I don't have to add any more either. Update. Hello again, everyone. Quite a bit has happened. After contacting everyone close to us, my friends, my father, and her family, I reached out to Mark's fiancée, sharing all the evidence I had. She too was served with papers at her workplace 2 days ago. Now you're fully up to date. About an hour after my last post, I was waiting for Jessica to arrive at the house, expecting her to be furious. Given everything that had unfolded, I wasn't sure what to expect. I checked all the security cameras, both inside and outside, to make sure they were working properly. I also called my friend telling him that Jessica had been served today and asking him to come over as soon as possible if she showed up. I didn't want to face any legal issues alone. Just as I had predicted, Jessica showed up, banging on the door and shouting to be let in. She was hurling insults, calling me heartless among other things. Ironically, all I could do was laugh. It was either that or shout back. Strangely, she didn't use her keys to enter, which I knew she still had. When my friend arrived, he started recording the scene on his phone from his truck. Unfortunately, he brought his wife along, who tried to intervene and calm Jessica down. This only made things worse when Jessica slapped her across the face, yelling at her to stay out of it. At this point, my friend, now with video evidence of the assault, called the police. Jessica continued her tirade until the police arrived. She then tried to play the victim, tearfully telling one of the officers that I had hit her and thrown her out. Meanwhile, my friend and his wife explained to the other officer that they had witnessed her aggressive behavior from the moment they arrived. Unable to verify Jessica's claims, the officers were at a standstill. When the officers approached me, Jessica pointed at me, accusing me of hitting her. As one officer began to handcuff me, I insisted that I could prove my innocence with the security camera footage. After reviewing the footage from the outdoor cameras, the officer apologized for the misunderstanding and acknowledged their initial bias. The situation ended with Jessica being arrested and charged with disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and driving under the influence. As the police escorted her to their car, Wendy arrived looking puzzled and concerned. I showed her the video on my phone, explaining what had happened. An officer then provided me with the case number and other relevant documents. Wendy began asking about the specifics of the charges, trying to understand the full scope of the night's events. After the chaos, Wendy and I went back inside. She explained that she had only left her house for about 10 minutes to run to the store, and when she returned, Jessica was no longer in the living room. Assuming Jessica had gone to bed after drinking too much wine, Wendy was initially unaware of the subsequent drama until she found Jessica causing a scene at my door. After discussing the night's events, Wendy asked if she could stay over, and I assured her she was welcome anytime. She mentioned that Jessica would have to spend the night in jail and wouldn't be eligible for bail until the morning. Wendy had called her parents to inform them of the situation and to see if they could arrange bail, as she didn't have the funds herself. We shared a beer and then turned in for the night. The next morning, Wendy had already left to meet with her parents. I haven't heard from Jessica, Wendy, or their parents since, and I doubt their conversations have been pleasant. Hopefully, Jessica managed to cool off while in jail. Update. The next morning, Wendy was gone before I woke up. Since then, I haven't heard from Jessica directly, but her lawyer has contacted mine, indicating they are ready to proceed with the divorce. I also reached out to Mark's fiancée to see if there were any developments on her end. We exchanged a few texts, but nothing major has happened there yet. Mark's fiancée told me she had kicked him out of her house. Her father and brother helped pack up all his belongings and dropped them off at his place. She mentioned that her dad and brother were tempted to confront him physically, but she persuaded them against it, wanting to move past the ordeal and start fresh. She thanked me for my support and said her close friends were there for her. On Friday, right after work, I rushed home with plans to head back to my cabin for the weekend. When I arrived, Wendy was waiting in my driveway. She wanted to collect some of Jessica's belongings, having a list of items Jessica wanted. I had already packed almost everything, with items boxed or placed in the garage. I made it clear I wouldn't transport or handle the items directly to avoid any claims of damage from Jessica. I offered to hire a moving company to manage everything, as I was heading to my cabin and didn't want to deal with any more of Jessica's issues. Wendy appreciated the gesture and wished me a good trip. She took a box of Jessica's clothes and placed it in her car, then asked if she could join me at the cabin. I agreed, suggesting she drop off the box at her place and pack a bag. By the time I had finished my errands and packed the truck, Wendy was ready. We locked up my house and set off for the cabin. The weekend was refreshing. The cabin's secluded location and beautiful views offered a perfect escape from everything. On Monday, I called a moving company, and by Tuesday, 3 movers arrived with a large truck. I meticulously recorded each item as it was boxed and loaded, taking photos of all the furniture. I thanked the movers for their patience and tipped each of them an extra $50. I sent all the documentation to my lawyer to ensure everything was accounted for. Now the house feels empty but cleaner without Jessica's things. Initially, my lawyer advised keeping any shared possessions, so I stored most of the furniture in a storage unit. I've been sleeping in the guest room since Jessica left and have started buying new furniture, storing most of it in the now empty garage. I've decided not to keep the house even if I win it in the divorce. It holds too many painful memories. Update. I've been busy coaching high school baseball, handling the divorce, and dealing with everything surrounding my soon-to-be ex, which hasn't left much free time. A lot has happened, so this update might be lengthy. A few days after the movers took Jessica's belongings, my lawyer received a claim from hers, accusing me of damaging items and demanding $1,500 in compensation, or she would take me to court. My lawyer responded by sending all the videos and pictures, asking her lawyer to specify the alleged damages. He assured me that this would show any judge how unreasonable she was being, and that although it might be a headache now, it would serve as perfect evidence in court. He commented on how unprepared her lawyer seemed for the level of detail in my documentation. Ever since discovering Jessica's affair, I had immersed myself in reading similar experiences online, determined not to become another victim of post-marital vengeance. I prepared meticulously for any possible accusations she could throw my way, refusing to leave any stone unturned. Jessica occasionally called, but I never answered. If she left a voicemail, I wouldn't listen, but directly forwarded it to my lawyer. He often joked that I was a lawyer's dream client, due to my thoroughness and compliance with his advice, a comment that always reassured and somewhat cheered me up amid the turmoil. About 3 weeks ago, my lawyer informed me that we had gathered enough evidence to either settle the matter out of court or show our willingness to resolve things amicably, which would reflect well on us if we did end up in court. We scheduled a meeting at a neutral lawyer's office. Before the meeting, he advised me to remain calm and not to react to anything Jessica might say, reminding me that everything discussed could be recorded and reviewed by a judge later. We arrived early in the morning for this crucial meeting. To my surprise, Jessica was already there with her lawyer when we arrived. As the lawyers exchanged greetings, Jessica and I sat in silence, preparing for what was about to unfold. Her lawyer started by asking about our settlement offer. Confident in the evidence we had, my lawyer stated that Jessica would receive half the selling price of the house and half of our savings. Essentially, she would leave with what she had brought into the marriage. He also warned that if the case went to court, he would reveal every detail of her infidelity and inappropriate behavior, including making her read out each incriminating message and describe every photo in court, along with showcasing the video of her recent charges. Jessica, clearly shaken by these statements, looked at me with tear-filled eyes, asking if there was anything she could do to make things right. I told her bluntly that the evidence indicated she had been unfaithful even before our wedding, and there was nothing she could do to fix it. I urged her to sign the settlement papers, emphasizing that it was more than fair given her actions. After a prolonged emotional outburst, during which she excused herself to the restroom, Jessica returned still in tears, but signed the papers. With that, our marriage was effectively over, pending the official processing of the divorce papers and the sale of the house. For those wondering, my relationship with Wendy remains strictly platonic but supportive, a valuable friendship during these turbulent times.